And I remember going to, portfolio reviews in San Diego, and Chiarello was up there, and he's just going, "Hey, if you're not at Frazetta level, if you're not at Mike Mignola level, don't even come sit down with us." I was like, I could just leave now, I mean, you're never going to be at that level. So then you just have to muster it and go, well, I guess I'm at that level. I'm going to go sit down anyways.
Hey, thanks for listening. First off, thank you for your patience and hanging in there while we worked hard to regain our equilibrium following Hurricane Helene. And as the fires still ravage Los Angeles, the awkward timing of this return is not lost on me. Living amidst massive destruction for the last 3 months and knowing that hundreds of thousands of people in California are doing the same, I questioned the value of even doing the podcast as I edited it. But I made a promise to myself that I would do this, and I owe the people who offer me their time for these conversations to share them with everyone. So again, thank you. Thank you. And a quick note, past guest Andrew Robinson lost his home in the Eaton fires, and his family are safe, but they lost everything. This includes his studio. I've added a link to Andrew's GoFundMe. He's a phenomenal artist and a great guy. And so if you can help him anyway, please do. Today's guest is Ryan Sook. And Ryan was on the podcast 3 years and 1 month ago, oddly. He's been one of my favorite artists for quite a while, and it turns out that Ryan is the artist on a 6-issue Black Canary series with Tom King that's out right now. This episode was supposed to come out before issue 1 hit the stands, but as it is, it drops before issue 3. If you haven't picked up the first 2 already, I really, really recommend that you do. It was an instant win for me. The structure of the story works so well, and Ryan's art is his absolute best. He adds such a level of depth and humanity to the characters throughout the series. I'm totally pumped to see how this one goes through. So our talk today is like a real shop talk. We go into what it takes to maintain his career in comics, the value of sketchbooks as an R&D tool, and how career success limits the time to utilize them. So it's this weird double-edged sword. We talk about digital and traditional tools. And like I said, this talk with his thoughtful, insightful answers and the fact that he shares his experiences so thoroughly, I really enjoyed listening to it as I edited. Since this was recorded back in September, Ryan compliments me in the opening on all the great recent, and I use that in quotes, episodes and how I'm on a roll. I left that in because it was also when I announced that I was throttling back my output for the podcast. And it seems that the natural disaster and some post-traumatic stress has had me over-indexing on the frequency factor. So I'm really happy to start the year off with this great conversation, and it's encouraging me to carry on with the podcast. So this is me with Ryan Sook. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. How you been?
I've been great.
Good. Been doing lots of podcasts. I've seen a bunch coming up, and that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I've been busy doing it. I've been busy with other things, so I kind of made it a non-committal every other week kind of thing, just because of, other things.
Yeah, understandable.
Life. Yeah.
Yes.
So which kind of makes it nice, although I don't know about you, but it's almost easier to do a thing if you're doing it all the time than to stop a thing and then start a thing.
Yes. It has a weird way of feeling like you never quite complete anything.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
And you always feel like you're starting up again. I don't know. I have this persistent, um, imposter syndrome about almost everything I do in my creative life. And I've been doing it for 30 years, that every time I start something, I'm like, okay, how do I do this again? Because I just feel like I'm starting from ground zero.
I feel like that every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nuts. And I don't know if I can attribute to being too diversified. Like I'm writing stuff. I'm designing things. I'm art directing other things. I'm drawing other things. And versus 25 years ago, I was just sitting at a drawing table drawing every day.
I get up and draw at a drawing table every day, and I feel like I'm relearning to draw every single day almost. I mean, it's just it's a weird thing. And you take breaks and you do sketches and you doodle or you take and it still feels like that all the time.
I'm sure I probably would be. I'm only remembering something from 25 years ago, so I could be. Hey, maybe that's why I'm not drawing comic books on a regular basis, right? I've just forgotten that I felt that every single day. Who knows?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny. Like, oh God, so you were on the show in 2021?
Got to be something like that. 21, 22, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 20. I think it was 21 because that was the summer when you did the Legion of Superheroes stuff with Brian.
That sounds right. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, that was quite some time ago.
Yeah. And I've done not much since.
Well, that's okay. So I didn't want to be like some sort of like jerk, but like, so what have you been doing? But but I think about it and I go, here's the interesting thing is that I look at your work with such envy at your aplomb with finish, and everything works and fits and it's all very like there. I'm like, okay, he's understanding what he's putting on the page, even though you're in a losing wrestling match. I get the emotional side of it, but I also go like, I remember having to crank out, pages day after day after day. And you go, I don't know how I or any of my mates at the time kept up with books, because the reality is like, if you're on a book, you did it until they kicked you off the book. Like it was, it was that kind of deal. But it seems like the industry has shifted a bit with the talent to kind of put them on schedules of like, we're going to give you a little bit of an opener in between.
Oh, there's no question of that. No question at all. In fact, I think that shift started probably in the early 2000s, when they're working with certain creators, certain creators who I guess they feel like their work is good enough that they like to publish it and use it and develop, or utilize their talents to promote their material and draw their comics and stuff like that. Some guys just can't do a monthly schedule. And right. So you take an artist like that and you put them on special. In fact, that was when I first started working. That was one of the things that I learned from Mignola, was what he was telling me was that he had realized, as had his editors, even in the late 80s and into the 90s and stuff, that he was a special projects artist. He was not going to be a monthly comics artist. So he did limited series and stuff like that. Same with Arthur Adams and all of the guys, oddly, that I was a huge fan of as a kid. So right. I found out I was a special projects guy, and it's a special project for everybody working with me because of it, I'm glad the industry has done that though.
Oh, for
because
sure.
it makes it possible for a guy like me to still make a living and not have to crank out material, some of which, if not all of which, I'm not pleased with, you know?
And it's funny. I think you do totally point it out. I mean, I think Arthur might have been the first guy that the business said, like, hey, we can't get this guy. He's not going to do it. Like, he just can't do it for what he puts on the page. And I don't think I'm sure at the beginning they were like, well, we can't do anything with him. But I'm sure some people were smart enough to go, let's figure something out. The predecessor to that would have been Michael Golden, who I don't think it was a matter of Michael not doing a monthly book, because he did, I think, 2 or 3 runs that were over a year long for different titles. But I don't think he really wanted to do that. I don't think that was his interest.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't know if Arthur was one of those guys where they just thought he couldn't do it. I don't know if he knew he couldn't do it or what the issue was, but definitely there was so much raw talent there that they had to find a way to put that artwork to use, no matter if it took months and months to get an issue out of him or whatever. Yeah. And that really is, he broke a lot of ground for a lot of people, myself included, no doubt. I'm sure probably Frank Miller did too. He also broke ground in that category, making prestige and limited series and special projects and stuff. And to get a 4-issue miniseries as Marvel used to do, or even George Perez with maxi series for DC and stuff, they weren't going to be able to meet a monthly schedule. And so to put those guys to work on special projects like that helped a lot of artists who really wanted to make the material more of a work of art, something that they knew they were capable of, rather than churning out something to meet deadlines and not be happy with it.
Yeah. I think, when it comes to monthlies, it's all about deadlines. Like, that's just they'll take a bus load of guys people who can hit that deadline every single time. And it's not a matter of glory and fame on the page. It's a matter of making the book, the story, continual and accessible, and something that shows up rather than doesn't.
Absolutely. And I still have the utmost respect for him. I've done monthly work. I started out doing monthly stuff for DC when I did about a year on the Spectre, and I did the better part of a year on Hawkman, and I've done it. Wasn't pleased with a lot of the work, and so I sort of shifted my attention to doing covers and stuff mainly, or small special projects, simply because I couldn't keep up with it. But I have the utmost respect for the guys who do, and there are some guys these days doing monthly books that are just like, I don't even know. I can't even understand how they do. Nick Klein, Ryan Stegman, Jorge Jimenez, Bruno Redondo. These guys do monthly work that is consistent, and every time Daniel Sampieri, what he's doing on Wonder Woman right now, all that stuff. To have one issue fill in a year, even, which some of them do, not all of them, but some of them, is astonishing to me at the level of artwork they're producing on such a regular clip. I feel like I just would be burnt to the crisp. But
we also could probably take into account that they might be a few years younger.
I definitely take that into account.
Yeah.
That's the age card is a big one. I get to play it. So.
Oh yeah, man. It's this thing that not that you're saying, I'm happy to be at the drawing table for 14 hours or more, but you can do it. You can go to bed, you can get up, and you can do it again.
I can't do it at all anymore. And I've got 2 little kids. So, not that little, but, young daughters. And, for me, I used to be able to do 14, 16, 18 hours a day, stay up all night, pull all-nighters all the time, once or twice a week. And it didn't seem to faze me. I just don't have it anymore. I can't do it at all. If I pull an all-nighter, I'm down for 2 days, after we're trying to recover. So, so
there's
age
no win.
definitely plays in. Yeah.
So this is thinking about it. I wonder if the attraction to the special projects artist when you're a younger person sets a level of internal expectation on your own creativity. So and this, not disparaging any single person, but if you're like, hey, I love the Avengers and you read the Avengers every month or whatever the book is, Batman, you go, okay, I like this and I want to draw that. But if you're like waiting for like artist X to do a thing and it blows your mind every time, that level of expectation just gets higher and higher.
It does. And it's shockingly, it gets shockingly higher and higher even still because, in the world we're in today with social media and being able to see artists who begin their careers there, really careers online somewhere, and then take off and become huge comic book artists, and they're doing amazing, amazing stuff. And it's seriously amazing. It's like, it definitely sets a high bar for the internal, gauge of what you're ready to put out into the world. It sets a high bar. And for me as a kid, the special project guys, they went along with a lot. My dad was an art director, so it went along with a lot of the artists and illustrators that he collected that I don't know if you could call them special projects guys. They were just in a different world altogether. A lot of the independents, Bernie Wrightson, Mobius, these guys, Barry Smith at that time, Jeff Jones, all the studio artists, all the stuff they're doing, that sets so high a bar. And I remember going to, portfolio reviews in San Diego, and Chiarello was up there, and he's just going, hey, if you're not at Frazetta level, if you're not at Mike Mignola level, don't even come sit down with us. I was like, I could just leave now, Right. You're never going to be at that level. So then you just have to muster it and go, well, I guess I'm at that level. I'm going to go sit down anyways, But it sets a high bar for somebody who's doing that. But, there were and are a lot of great comic book artists who are explicitly comic book periodical storytellers who nailed the deadlines constantly and consistent. Neil Adams, Jim Aparo, Jack Kirby. And those guys' art is astonishing. Not to mention Wally Wood, but I was going to say Frank Robbins.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Prolific beyond prolific and excellent in every manner of execution of the craft. Those guys could do all of it, and they did it all really well for years and years and years consistently. And that sets just as high a bar. I remember when I was doing Legion of Superheroes and talking to my editor and going, Kirby didn't really even start producing the way he was producing till he was about 40, so I'm feeling like maybe this is my, this is just my starting point, right? But no, I found out quickly. There are guys like, like Mobius, or maybe even like Art Adams or Mike, who are, they're just slower. They just don't produce as much. Everything they produce is great. You want to see it. You love it. It's amazing. They just don't produce as much. And Frazetta's right up there with that group too. He was not, by most standards, even in illustration, a prolific artist by any means. But everything he did was genius. So you just go, oh well, I'll just get the Ballantine books when they come out. I'll look at those and I'll revere them. And then you have 4 or 5 of them, and you see everything he ever did.
Yeah, right. It's not George Perez's shelf. It's a very different shelf.
Yeah, it's a very, very different shelf. It's like it's not the Kirby shelf, or it's not the even the Frank Robbins shelf. Those shelves are stacked with things that they've produced, and they're amazing. They're wonderful in their own right. and then you have another artist who produced a quarter of what they did, and you love it just as much. So I don't know what's better or worse. I'm just glad that for myself, I can still do what I do and make a, have a job at it.
Yeah, totally. I think there was an expectation. I guess it was just a standard. There wasn't a special projects option in 1965 or 1970. When you talk about the studio, it's funny because I'm reading Monster right now, and my wife likes to ask questions of the comic books that look more upscale than the regular comic books that she would see, floating in the house. So there's this big, thick, bound thing, and she's like, okay, so what's the deal about this thing? And I had to explain the studio in the 70s and how that group of people changed the temperature of the water in comic books based off of what they grew up reading in the 60s, which made all the goop in the water just right for, Alan Moore, Frank Miller, et cetera, and so forth to explode a decade later into what we all go, oh my God, this is what modern comics is. But that group of studio guys were like these, they're like the Renaissance masters who kind of woke everybody up and said, hey, you know what? We could add an extra point of perspective from 2-point to 3-point in the world. And poof.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it changes. Well, like I say, I mean, I grew up with that stuff. That was the stuff my dad was collecting at the time because it was the great material coming out. I actually was, as a kid, I was never into the comics of the 60s and 70s and even earlier 50s and 40s and stuff. And that's the stuff I like the most now. I love that stuff more than Alex Toth's, any of his comics, of course.
Yeah,
but
sure.
You find that stuff and it's like Frank Robbins is my real go-to these days as far as just something I like to look for, because it's like every time I find something, I think it was on Comic Art Fans. I just saw recently somebody had posted these pages of a Batman story that went unpublished. It's just genius. It's this brilliant piece of work that he did, and all the stuff that he did for the Shadow and stuff. I mean, I look at that stuff and I just it definitely breaks the idea of what I thought of as comics of that era, which was just 6-panel grids and all the balloons in the corner, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He was all over the place and doing things that I hadn't seen anybody else, and I still haven't seen anybody else quite pull off as well as he did. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, his comic books were, I had stacks of them as a kid in the 70s. Like, the Human Torch, the Invaders, like all that stuff was just there. And it was weird because like Kirby, I go, oh, this is old comic book art, in my mind. But I kept opening them up. I kept reading them over and over again. So clearly they were doing things in that struck a chord within my little stupid brain at the time.
Sure. Well, and then you think of a guy like that who probably influenced those studio artists and that perfect storm of pop culture and the way that they were able to feed off of each other in that environment of the 70s, where everybody wanted to see comics break into something new. I think everybody saw it. There was potential there for something more than just every month I could go to the store and get this or not. It wasn't a disposable form of entertainment anymore. Now it became a highly acclaimed form of entertainment. And so you have people who still love, and I think it's kind of gone on. It does definitely still reflect in modern comics that way, but somehow or another, I still like looking back at the old ones so much more. There's something there that's just still such a pleasure.
I have to agree with you. I mean, I'll say it over and over. I think we're in this age of the best quality of artwork being produced. It's unparalleled with what the talent is putting out there, along with the advancement in the tools.
Sure.
It does make a big difference.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like, you get that black and white, Fantastic Four volume, the collection of like the first, I don't know, 5 years or whatever of that book. And it's wonderful to sit and read that stuff, or anything, read the old Toth stuff, or any of that stuff. It's great.
Yeah, it is. It was great stuff. There's a lot of great artists working. I think probably the thing that has made it more fun for us in these days than it was even able to be enjoyed at the time is the fact that there's collections like you just mentioned now, know, and we can go to the collection based on a creator or an artist that we follow in ways that wasn't even a possibility in that era. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
And you could be a fan. I mean, I have a friend who was a huge Cam Smith fan, and all the stuff that he did, anytime he was, when he's working on JLA and stuff, anything he does, they're going to go get it. And obviously that was a little easier. I mean, Dave Cockrum comes along. You can follow certain artists in certain eras on a monthly basis, and you're going to do that. But we have a real privilege nowadays to be able to just devour huge, large collections of the work of these artists, and it's just like the modern comics you were talking about, and the art, the quality of art. It really sets a high bar when you look back at that stuff. And I think the thing that's different about it too is I think that some of the appeal of the older comics, at least for me, is that there really was a true and clear understanding of the language of comics, and telling a story and using your artwork with that explicit intent to tell a story, as opposed to draw something as dynamic and magnificent as it could possibly be drawn. And I wrestle with that myself all the time. Partly because of what we were talking about, the bar that's been set by certain artists. But I think the appeal of those older comics is that language that's still there. So if you saw a guy who had real artistic chops and could just draw the heck out of anything and do creative and innovative layouts and design, and at the same time bring the story across without any confusion or challenge or anything at all, Ross Andrew or somebody like that stuff just blows your mind. And the fact we can look at huge volumes of it now makes it a lot more enjoyable for me.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. There's a, I wonder how, I think because that sort of age of comic books is pre deconstruction of comics. So there hadn't been the time of comic books being out long enough in that sense where people are like, okay, let's see what we can do to break it apart. And then I feel that I'm going to say maybe the advent of 82-ish, around when MTV comes out, that change in sort of sensibility for storytelling, when you started getting more image driven work on television, people start responding to that. So you have and they're reflected off of film directors like Michael Mann, who does The Thief. And it's a very different looking type of crime thriller. So I think you have this kind of back and forth that's happening in this, in the visual storytelling world, which only opens up that idea of like big, splashy, dynamic work. But then you go back a decade and you see Steranko kind of doing something like that, but he's still nailing the story. He's not losing the reader in any way.
Right. And actually, Jim Steranko is another guy who's probably a great forerunner of the special projects artist that we're talking about, for the fact that he tended to focus on an arc or a short story here and there, and the impact that those things had because of the fact that he did that kind of focus, I mean, I think that's probably been to just great benefit for the industry as a whole in modern times. I still really like the monthly artists that can get the job done on a
Yeah.
regular basis, because I think they keep the rest of us working. They really keep the rest of us alive. They keep the industry alive. If you just had special projects, I don't know. I think the market would look a lot different without the periodical that we're standing on to hold us up. I think it might look more like European comics. I don't know, albums and things like that.
Right.
Which, I don't know, good, bad, I don't know. But I think it would look a lot different. So.
Yeah. I mean, if I could think of like an analogy, would be television. You have your TV series that we know that what they were 22, 24 episodes a season. And then what lived outside of that was something like HBO, which would do sort of like special projects type of, movies or limited series back in the 80s or 90s, which didn't have these lengthy sort of production lines or, hey, we got to get these out every week. We got to fill up the TV schedule. So I think people like Steranko could be that sort of early harbinger of people going, you see that Steranko, and then you see Barry Smith shift, his work in the early 70s into what we all know his direction ended up being. And, you get a younger generation going, I want to do that. Like, I want that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was thinking, so you maybe think about, who I'm thinking peer group. I think Adam Hughes was the first in like my peer group who started off as monthly person doing Maze Agency and then JLA. But I think as you accrue skill sets, these skill sets take time. It's almost like once you get better at doing certain things, you can't just ignore this sort of mastery or chops that you're gaining. So you go, okay, well, it's going to take me longer to do this. It's going to take me longer to get this done versus learning a design shortcut language that like Jack Kirby implied. Like he's like, okay, this is what this is going to look like. And I'm just going to, that's what it's going to be.
I mean, obviously you have a guy like, obviously one of my great heroes of modern comics, Adam Hughes. He's a guy who can just draw. He draw anything he draws. It looks like what he intended it to be, and he's got a great sense of design. And more than that, he puts personality into his work, which is, I think, more than probably anything else, was the biggest transition from the work that he was doing on Maze Agency or JLA and stuff like that. Legionnaires, all that stuff was beautiful to look at, and I'm beautifully drawn. And some of the covers, you got hints at who he is as an artist, his personality, his sense of humor and stuff that comes across. And that stuff's more enjoyable to me now that he takes the time for him to focus on, when he started doing the Wonder Woman run and stuff like that, to see an artist put, not just do a great drawing or add to it their own style of inking or color, which was seriously groundbreaking in my opinion, as far as what Adam did for digital color. But he took the character and the subject matter that he was working on and created all these iconic images and moments in such a way that sets him apart from a lot of it. And you can't do that on a monthly basis. So if you're doing interiors is what I mean. Yeah. Like you're saying. So yeah, do you want to see Adam Hughes still cranking out monthly books? There are people who probably do. They just want to see more and more of his stuff. But if you recognize the value of, like you said, those artistic chops, that you can't do it that fast. Right. You're willing to wait. I'm willing to wait.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like to produce work that way too. It's just that's kind of what I found out. I just didn't want to. There's a difference between knowing you can do a job and doing a job well, and what it takes. Those can be worlds apart for me. For me, at least. And I think, yeah, that's, I'd rather do a job well than just get it done. Most days anyway.
Right. Yeah. When I was exiting art school and, and on a frequent basis, walking my butt down to the Marvel offices to show my work, that's when Adam was doing his run on JLA and Chris was doing Legionnaires. So it was this moment. I'm like, oh man, that's what I have to to me, my mind was like, well, that's what I have to do. Like that's the bar, which was ridiculous because both those guys are doing something so different and unique at the time, but it was, and they're still doing it even better.
Yeah.
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 Well, not easy. So the special projects artist doesn't, you're not sitting at your drawing table doing the same book for a couple of years or however long it goes. That of course that can't be. It could be true because you're just doing it at a slower rate, but it takes a lot more planning to manage that kind of career.
Yeah, it does. It takes a I think it just takes a different kind of planning, and all I can say is for the last, since I started doing interior work again on a more regular basis, which wasn't until about 6 years ago. Prior to that, I was just mainly doing cover work, and that allowed me to work at my pace and meet deadlines consistently and stuff like that. And I think since DC has had a handful of editors and writers, great writers that I've gotten to work with who wanted to see more interior work from me, the thing that I can only praise them for it. The editors and DC as a publisher and the writers that I've worked with basically have just done nothing but been supportive of me as an artist for the schedule and to make it work in the way that I can. I don't have any complaints except against my own self, for not being faster at times. But I've gotten nothing but great support and stuff from them, which allows me to keep doing at least the very best I can do under the circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
And it does take a different kind of preparation and management of schedule and stuff like that. I did Legion of Superheroes. I penciled the better part of whatever our run was, 12-ish, 10 issues, 12 issues, whatever it was. I can't even remember now. And had great help from Wade Von Grobiger, who inked it, and Jordi Belair, who colored it. After that, did some work on Blue and Gold with Dan Jurgens.
Yeah, that's right.
I think it was 8 issues that we did, and I did the most of that, not all of it. But I did color the entire thing too, which gave me opportunities to do some stuff that I hadn't done before, like color Cully Hamner and Kevin McGuire, and that was a treat in and of itself. Even though I couldn't draw those particular issues, to color those artists was really cool. And then I did a Batman book with Cy Spurrier that was part of some sort of event. I can't remember what it was now. Planet Doom? I don't know what. Anyway, I can't remember what the thing was, but it was a Batman book. We had a great time doing that. And I got to, and like I say, after you do stuff like that and DC says, okay, yeah, you penciled, inked, and colored 6 out of 8 issues. That's great. And we really like those issues. Let's give him a project he can do the whole thing. And they did. And it worked out well, I think, for all of us. And then, and now I'm working on my project with Tom, Black Canary. And we've been working on it for a long time now. Tom actually he's probably been waiting like 2 years for this thing to come out. He started work on it probably 3 years ago. And I picked it up at a point when he actually has written the entire series. That's never happened in my 30 years of work, well, near 30 years of working in comics. I've never, ever gotten a project, even a special project, and I've done lots of them, miniseries and stuff like that, where I got all the scripts in before I drew page 1.
That's crazy.
That's never happened before. And to me, it's been an absolute pleasure to have the end from the beginning and know what it is, and discover that you make very different decisions along the way when you're illustrating something, where you know what's coming next issue before you get, before you even finish the issue you're on. That's never happened, and it's been really great. And it's taken me forever, but DC and Tom both are just, like I say, my editor Brittany, and my previous editor Ben Abernathy, they both are just have been ultra supportive and letting me do my thing to the best of my ability to make this project what it is. And I'm excited for it to come out pretty soon, because as far as doing special projects work, if you're going to do that kind of stuff, it's always troubling if the schedule doesn't continue the way that you hope it will when it starts,
Yeah. I mean, that's the comics motto is the schedule is going to change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes it's just scary, right? But it tends to start out with a lot of projects being, it's not on the schedule,
Right.
So you don't really have a deadline, but let's try and keep it on to a steady, and this kind of thing. And I that's all I do is work on the projects I'm working on. I don't do multiple things at a time if I can help it usually, but staying on one project at a time, even still, best intentions and best laid plans, things change, and stuff comes up and goes on schedules, and when you can't finish what you wanted it to do or wanted to be able to do. But this project, I can finally say we've got 4 issues completed now. I think we're waiting on the lettering for issue 4, and I'm about halfway through issue 5, and we've got 6 issues. They're all oversized, and Dave Stewart coloring it. So it's,
oh wow,
yeah, it's such a cool thing. Clayton Cowles is doing the letters, and he's doing a great job on it. And it's kind of like finally getting to do a special projects thing that you actually get to finish. I don't think I've done that since Arkham Asylum, probably. Arkham Asylum with Dan Slott way back in the day was the first time I had. That was the first job. That was the first special project I had that didn't have a deadline or that wasn't on the schedule, and I think it ruined me actually. But
right. It set a bad precedent.
Yeah, it did. For me, it did, unfortunately. But.
Right. Well, so I mean, I guess so. Timing, because listen, timing's everything, and to your just a little side note, like if you're in the comic business, when you have a larger staff that work for the publisher, when somebody gets promoted or moves to a different office or something, be prepared wherever you are in that organization on the creative end that things are going to change, just because stuff has to get moved around to accommodate new people, whatever the thing is, and schedules change. So that's a little warning pro tip.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, we started this project with Ben Abernathy, who's the editor, and Brittany Holzer, who came on as the editor. I've worked with on several different projects over the last decade or so, and both of them are just great. And I think, it's a weird thing we were talking about when you start out. I never wanted to be difficult to work with, and I never wanted to be that guy who's always just difficult because he's late or whatever. I never wanted to be that guy. I had a really hardcore work ethic, and I'd kill myself to get stuff in on deadline, and I still do my very best always to try and get stuff in on a regular basis. But it helps when you're working with people who understand who you are right up front, because you've worked with them before and for years. And I think both of them know I don't sit around playing video games and watching cartoons and stuff like that. I work all the time, and it's just a matter of getting it to a level I think that's acceptable. But yeah, things do change when you have those shifting and promotions and moves around. But like I say, I think, at least for me, I've been around, and especially at DC, long enough that people are kind of like, oh, you're working. I have imaginings in my head. Oh, you're working with Ryan. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, man. Just check in with them. Check in with them.
Right. It's like who gets the Ryan call this week?
I know. I feel bad for the people. I do. I feel bad for the people I work with. But like I say, I mean, I give them high praise, because Ben, Brittany, Jessica, several of the other editors that I've worked with especially in the last decade. It wasn't like that in the 90s and early 2000s. It was always like, if you blew it, they let you know that you were, they were. And I think, at least right now, it's less about letting you know with the people I'm working with. It's less about letting you know you blew it than it is about encouraging you to maintain and not get so stressed that you freak out or
totally
any number of other things. It's just a matter of, hey, we got to get this done,
mm-hmm.
and anything we can do to support you and help you get it done, and that's great. And it's been working out great. So
yeah, I love that. There's a, I remember working with somebody who just stopped communicating, and every single text, email, whatever I got across was, listen, this stuff happens to everybody. Everybody has life happen and blows a deadline or whatever. That's okay. But the worst thing you can do is just disappear. Like, we have to be able to figure a way to get through all this. And that's,
right.
The bottom line, because I think self-hatred sort of steps in when you are in that position and all you want to do is just, curl up and hide.
Sure. But at the same, I mean, I think it's a two-way street too. In fact, it's one of the things when I first worked with Brittany, I think she had just come off an internship and become an assistant editor. And that was probably, I hate to even think how long it's been now, but like I say, it's probably close to at least like 7 or 8 years ago now. And I knew right off the bat she'd go far in the company. She's a senior editor now. She's moved up rapidly because she's an excellent communicator.
Mm-hmm.
She knows how to stay in touch. You don't wait to hear back, and we have a really open and clear sense of communication. And I don't ever feel like I have to hide. And I can just say, this is where I'm at. And she'll say, all right, let's make this the next goal, and it's a back and forth that's workable. Mm-hmm. And I don't think, and I worked with a lot of other editors. I mean, one of the first jobs I ever did, I worked with a very prominent group editor at DC who I think I had met him one time at a show, and he said, yeah, I'll hire you to do something. And I was like, that'd be great, and he gave me his card or whatever. I had called him a couple of times and left messages, and I never heard anything. And this was even, well, anyway, I won't get into pre-email. But anyways, I showed up from my day job, which was driving a truck, and I had a FedEx box sitting on my porch that had pages, a script, and a deadline form that was a week later. Mm. I mean, it was an 8-page story, one of my first jobs ever. Yeah. It was an 8-page job, and it had like a deadline, and I had a day job. So, and I had no idea it was coming. I had gotten no notification from the editor. I had no communication with him outside of that. And I did the job, and it was published and everything like that. And then I heard from him, and he said, oh, it was great, and I'll hire you again. And I was like, great, I mean, and then I didn't hear from him at all for like 6 months. He did hire me again, gave me another job. And it happened under similar circumstances. I think I got a phone call from him. He said, hey, I got this job. It's going to be due, at the end of next month. And it's a 38-page oversized annual or something. 48 page. I was like, I was so hungry, and sure. It was like, hey, I can quit my day job now.
Right.
But his communications never improved over the entire time that I worked with him, which was for a few years early on. And he's not the only editor that I've ever had that experience with. That was my experience with several editors over the years. And but when you work with somebody and they communicate both as either as a freelancer or an artist or as an editor and stuff, things seem to go so much smoother no matter what.
Yeah, it sounds magical to me. I've had some great experiences with editors, but I've also had just the bulk of them were I was in the office and they handed me a script, and that was it. So they were just like, get it in, and and here's the date when we need it, and you go, oh, okay, and that was it. Like there was very little phone and there was no email, but it was very little phone communication.
Yeah, I think that's probably, that's something I never experienced. I never was in the offices with anybody. It was always, by the time I started in 97, it was always long distance communications and faxes and stuff like that. Faxing.
Yeah, the fax machine. Yes.
The fax machine. All the time. But it was also, an absolute dream come true. I mean, I didn't even care. I mean, I remember when I got that package, I was freaked out and immediately stressed and immediately started working on it and got it in on time, on deadline and everything. And same thing with the next project, and same thing with my first comic job, which was a fill-in issue for John Paul Leon. Oh my gosh, talk about
big boots.
Setting a high bar. Yeah, that was daunting. That was a daunting one, but I got that done. And like you were saying, some of that stuff when you're 19 years old, 18 years old, and even into your late 20s and into your 30s, I worked nonstop. I mean, all the time. I was just drawing all the time, and I could maintain. And I still had trouble maintaining a schedule, but it wasn't for lack of. But now I work just as much. I just don't have the energy to work as many hours a day as I did in those years when I didn't have kids and I could work nonstop. But I'm glad that there's a move in the industry that allows for projects like this to come along. To give artists like me a chance to do something that you can be happy with to put out there. Hopefully that people who are plunking down not 75 cents or $1, but $5 for a comic, that when they get it, they're like, that was worth the $5 I just put down.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess that kind of leads to the timing and the process kind of side of this, because you're not putting out 22 pages in a month. You're putting out it over a protracted period of time. And, I think at first blush, most every artist, will go, oh, well, that sounds great. That sounds wonderful. I'd have all the time in the world to do the thing that I want to do. But it's hard to maintain sort of like momentum when you're not charging. And the other thing is that there's a financial aspect to it. The longer that time you're taking, the less you're making for the project. It just doesn't, you're eating into your bottom line.
That's true.
So I think that's something that comes with time. When you're probably 28 and someone handed you that job, you'd be like, I don't care. I'll take forever to do this because your cost of life is so low. But what is the biggest fire for you sitting down to sort of push you?
Well, I mean, it's my job, so I just do it every day. I think the struggle for me personally, the fire that keeps me motivated. I just want to make do good work. I mean, that is my motivation. It's been my motivation for a long time. And I like you were saying, there is a financial give and take in all of it. I've never really been I haven't been in it for the money. If I was in illustration or artwork for money, I probably wouldn't be in comics.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more money in other places for maybe less work,
yes.
At least in my experience. Some of the video game companies that I've worked with and some of the film production companies that I've worked with, it's a lot more money for a lot less work. And there's just no question of it. That doesn't mean that guys who do that stuff don't work really, really hard. See, because I think what I found is, for myself, I'm a comics artist. There've been opportunities to steer in different directions, and I've seen a lot of friends and colleagues who entered into comics and were like amazing comic artists, and they had great success in comics, and they're not in comics anymore, just at all, because there is that bottom line, somewhere along the way. And I guess for me, I just realized, this is what I do. So as long as someone's still willing to put up with me and pay me a little bit of money to do it, that's just what I do. And I have never really had the goal of, just say it like that. I mean, money or financial success, I don't think it would be my goal regardless of what I was doing. I think if I had that goal straight, which I probably should have, but if I'd had that goal straight early on, I probably would have gone into a totally different. Someone asked me that one time if I would. They were filming a video of some kind, and he asked me if even if I couldn't make a living at it, would I still be doing comics? And I said, absolutely not. No. Of course not. I'm not going to sit in my parents' garage or basement just for the love of comics, cranking out comics that no one will ever see because I love comics so much and all that. I'm not that guy. I'm definitely not that guy. I'd go get a job at the grocery store, and pay the bills and come home and watch TV at the end of the day, and I'd be completely satisfied. And I could probably be satisfied doing that now, except that I made an effort and an endeavor to have a career in comics at some point when I was young, and it happened. And I've never been out of work, despite my shortcomings and despite my failings as a regular type of a prolific artist or something like that. I've never been out of work, and which I'm grateful for. And it was the career I chose, the path I chose to go down. So I'm going to press on, And until the day somebody says, no, we don't have any work for you, or no, we've got nothing for you, and it all dries up, then I'll head down to the local grocery store and get back into bagging,
I loved bagging. Back with I loved the good paper sack and the Tetris of that whole thing. It was great.
Oh man. Working at the grocery store it had its perks, I mean, every job's got its perks, and I'm glad I still get to do this. And in some ways it's startling to me that I can still draw with pencil and paper and ink and stuff. The way that the world has changed even since I've been working in it. So I'm just thankful. Yeah.
So you are you 100 except for the coloring, you're all on paper?
Yep.
That's amazing.
I have done a handful of completely digital projects, just covers here and there. And I was satisfied with them, or I wouldn't have turned them in.
Right.
But for the most part, I sort of leave digital alone except for color. I'm comfortable drawing in it. I'm happy with it. I've built up my inking brushes and all that kind of stuff. But if I ever use them for print work, it's almost always strictly in an editorial type fashion, which I fought with. In fact, right when I started Legion of Superheroes, I spent months, almost all the design work for Legion of Superheroes was done digitally, almost all of it, because I intended to draw that book digitally. And I had, called around and emailed around to other artists who I knew worked digitally really well. I think I asked questions of Chris Somney and Francis Manipul and Doc Shaner and a few other guys who I see them work digitally, and the work is so good.
Mm-hmm.
And just to get the, what's your approach? Because I wasn't trained in,
Right.
And they helped me out greatly, and they set me up. I would use this is how I do that, this, that, and the other. And I was like, oh, that's fantastic. And you can watch all kinds of tutorials and videos, and then you do a couple of little design works and drawings and stuff like that. And one of the things that I found is if you ever are under a press where you have to get something done, it was my imagination that digital would allow me to do that so much faster. And actually, it takes me longer to do certain things digitally than it ever takes me to do by hand. So, because I've just been doing it for so long.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the fact I still get to draw, I mean, it's still all done on paper with pencil and pen and ink. And
yeah.
And in fact, Francis Manipul is one of those guys who I think just recently on his most recent project, Rockefellers, that is drawing everything by hand on paper again, doing all traditional.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shocking to me that a guy who was traditional and then went into digital, and he's been prolific all along, but man, his traditional stuff's even better than it was, first of all, than it was before. And it's even better than his digital stuff was. I don't know what happened. That guy, he's on fire right now. But anyway, that stuff looks so amazing. And he's not the only one. A lot of guys who were doing digital stuff consistently have moved back into doing traditional and just going, I don't even know why I stopped working traditionally. I mean, so it's interesting.
The first digital work I ever did was for advertising. And it made sense at the time to do it on the computer. And I've messed around with digital over the years. And I even said like, if I was doing a monthly book, I think I would do it digitally because my mind was like yours. I'm thinking, this would be faster. I would be able to do things in a quicker fashion. And then I think within the last 6 months, I had this thought of like, well, if somebody just backed up a truck with money and said, hey, I want you to do a comic book. And so I didn't have to worry about paying for anything else. I'm like, I think I would do it all on paper because I sit and I draw. I mean, I did a drawing, I did a design drawing for a client yesterday on the iPad, and I was wanting to break it in half because it just wasn't really feeling I could get into the thing. And then I'm like, well, maybe it's a limitation of just doing it on an iPad app. So then I slaved it to the computer to use it as a tablet, but it still just didn't have all the oomph I wanted to get out of it. And it's just this thing on paper with a pencil or a brush. My facility to be able to do something I don't know, but it almost feels like you're carving. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
It's like a tool that you're carving onto the paper with something dark.
Yeah, no, it's it's weird. I sort of as an artist and as a fan of good artwork and illustration and stuff, I like stuff that's good, just good. Like I don't really care what the medium is and stuff like that. There are artists who work totally digital, like Jorge Jimenez is one of those guys. He's a digital artist. He can do traditional stuff, but he's a digital artist, and his work is excellent. It's nothing but great, And there are other guys who do that as well. And then there are these sort of geniuses who can combine both. I think the first guy I noticed doing that was James Jean, but then you have, even Chris Somney, or there are a lot of artists now who, Duncan Fagredo, who will draw in digital and then ink and traditional and back and forth and whatever. And I like, it's like whatever gets the job done.
Totally.
I love all the tools. I love all the different things and certain things, but traditionally something about, for me personally, something about the relationship of space is when I'm drawing on paper, or painting on paper or something like that, there's a different relationship of space in my mind than there is when I'm doing something digitally. And I noticed that I fell into a habit that I notice is common among artists who work mainly digitally, and that is those minor adjustments of size and dimension and stuff like that easily transformable and adjustable, and those things are amazing. First of all, they're amazing, but those are the things that made me think I would be able to work faster that way. And I actually found out that I worked much slower because I second guess every single move I make, and I could adjust every little thing. And when I'm on paper, the relationship of, I think it's just muscle memory almost, a lot of it. But the spatial relation between things as I draw is completely different mentally than it is in a digital medium.
So it makes me think of like the Beatles. They record all these amazing albums that live forever on 8 tracks, 4 tracks, whatever the number of tracks it was. But like going digital is like, oh, hey, here you have 128 tracks. Like all you're going to be doing is like, okay, we're going to put this one symbol is going to be on this track. And I think you end up maybe possibly missing the greater picture with all the details, forest and the trees kind of scenario.
Yeah, I had a friend telling me about there was a very famous album by King Crimson that came out, and I think probably 69 or somewhere in the early 70s, something like that. And he's like, you listen to this and it's not going to blow your mind today the same way it blew my mind then, because you understand it, that at that time, these guys were there playing the instruments at the same time. This was not a multi-layered track. And to hear a song like this that's got these almost orchestral arrangements of psychedelic and electric rock music, stuff. It was mind-blowing to hear a band be able to perform that even in a recording session where you could amplify and adjust and modulate and everything like that. They're doing it in real time, and it does make a real difference to hear and yeah, that's a good analogy, because when you're doing comics and drawing on paper or painting a painting, I don't know. I mean, I literally was, like I say, I just appreciate good work. I was blown away to discover that some of Juliano Totino Tedesco's work, his painted covers and stuff, were digital. I had no idea. I didn't know he worked digitally, and it wasn't until I actually saw something somewhere where he had recorded his screen or something. I'm like, son of a! I mean, it just that is incredible to me. It's just totally incredible to me that someone can do work like that looks, like you said, the technology, the tools, they're available. But I think it also is partly what you grow up with. A lot of these guys, if they went, and especially any of them who've gone to art school in the last 10 years. I did a workshop in Rome in 2015 where they asked me to come over and show them how I do a comic book cover. What a treat that was to do. It was a real pleasure. But I remember sitting around with a bunch of the students after class one night, and they were showing me all these digital tools that artists were using, and not just them, not just students, but like, oh yeah, this guy uses this for this, and this guy uses this for this, and if you're drawing Star Wars comics, they've got all the ships and the models and the this, that, and the other, and you can just. And I just said, I don't want to know. Just don't show me that. I really don't. I don't want to know. I mean, I don't want to know. I'd rather just be impressed with the quality of the work, because as an illustrator, it's just, you got to get the job done. Not as a huge anime fan, but as a fan of anything that has a great story or something like that. Those moments when they incorporate 3D CG models and stuff into hand-drawn, digitally hand-drawn, but still hand-drawn anime and stuff like that. It's obvious, but it's still kind of cool in its own way, I mean, there's some validity and something impressive about all the different ways you can create artwork and tell a story nowadays. And I don't know, I guess
You said it, man. It's whatever works.
yeah.
Like, I think the bottom line, it's whatever works. And I get that, though I'm curious as to when there would ever be an artist edition from a digital artist.
That I can't speak to. I don't know. I mean, it's like I was thinking I saw one of your I haven't listened to it yet, but one of your podcasts I think recently was Ben Caldwell. Is that right? You
Yeah.
to Ben? He's a great artist, and I remember first seeing his stuff when he did Wednesday Comics, because we were working on that book together, and I saw that stuff and I thought, this guy's he's onto something. But he's another one of those guys he's bridging that gap, right? I mean, he's drawing stuff in pencil and then digitally coloring. That's back then.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't seen, at least to my knowledge at the time, digitally colorized pencils until I saw Ben doing that. And then I think I saw or recognized that Adam was colorizing some of his grayscale drawings and stuff like that. But it had a profound impact. And he's still a guy who draws like crazy, and he can paint and everything traditionally. But notice that he does a lot of stuff digitally as well. Ben Oliver's another great artist, does a combination of the two. And when you see those guys do the kind of work that they do, you just kind of go, man, this guy could sit down and draw anything he wanted, for sure. If he had all the time in the world, he could draw anything he wanted. He could paint anything he wanted and make it amazing. But there is the benefit of these tools that we have,
Yeah.
And even to the degree of some of the guys that do marker drawings and stuff like that. I mean, the markers, the Copic markers and the stuff that we have today.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. But it's like looking, I mean, I remember one of my favorite illustrators, Bob Fawcett, has his book out that I read, and he was talking about, the inception of magic markers and how there's this backlash at the time of real artists don't use marker pens, and stuff like that.
Sure, that makes sense. It makes total sense.
It totally. You're not a real artist unless you're dipping a quill, a feather, doggone it, that you crafted and making your own ink or some crap. Yeah. I mean, every time some innovation comes along, everybody's got some thing with it. I think really what it is it's you find your place of an ability to either use it or not use it. You know what I mean? And I noticed that still so many people that do what we do and like what we do, they still start out with a piece of paper and a pencil or a crayon or something. I mean, something like that. The fact that you can take something and make an image out of it on something two-dimensional and share it with people. I don't know if they're working in, if they're working in the digital realm or the three-dimensional model realm that they model and then they, I don't know. I mean, it's not my cup of tea, but if they do it great, then great.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, greatness is kind of undeniable.
Yeah, it is.
So I don't really care what the thing is, but if it's great, I'm going to be wowed by it in one way or the other. I may not go like, this is the thing I love, but I'm going to go, wow. Like, I can't believe they pulled that off. Amazing.
It is. Somebody asked me that one time about who I thought were great artists and stuff like that. And then they were asking me about like who I thought really sucked or something.
Nice. Oh, wait, that's my next question. God damn it.
Who really sucks right now? I don't know. I don't think like that, at least as not consciously. I don't recognize myself thinking like that. I usually just appreciate because I said I just like good work, I mean, there are artists who I don't follow because their work consistently doesn't appeal to me. But if I see them do something great, I'm still going to go, that's great, you know?
Yeah.
And because that's a great piece of work. And they go, oh, well, that's very diplomatic. It's not diplomatic. It's the reality of it. There's been great artists who have done stuff that I didn't think was great, you know? Not because they aren't still totally an amazing, great artist, but because that particular piece, for whatever reason, just doesn't appeal to me. As it doesn't touch me on that level of appreciation. Something didn't strike the right chord for me. My own work has that capacity all the time.
Well,
somebody was saying about someone was saying about another artist, they're hit or miss. And I thought, God, that's me. I mean, that sums me up. It's either hit or miss for me. There's either the job that I do that I go, I couldn't have done it any better, and I'm real satisfied with it. And if I was 11 years old, I would have bought that. I would probably would have liked that.
Yeah.
And then there are the jobs that I just go, man, I put everything I could into that, and it's just still a piece of crap. I mean, I just can't stand looking. It's the best I could do, but I can't look at it ever again because it makes me sad to know that I did that.
Yeah, it's the best you could do then.
It's the best. I always do the best I can do under the circumstances. Sure. Always, no matter what. I remember Wrightson said that in an interview one time that I read, that somebody had accused him of being a check chasing hack, and he's like, it's a ridiculous statement. Everybody who works for a check. Everybody's doing this for a living. That's the job. I'm not chasing the check. I don't hack it out to get the check. I always and only do the best work I can do under the circumstances. Mm-hmm. If you don't like it, it doesn't mean I didn't do my best. It doesn't mean I didn't do that. So that happens for me all the time, though, hit or miss. But I see it all over the place. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've seen comics that I thought certain people drew that Dave McKeon I'll use him as a prime example because no one he couldn't care less. Dave McKeon has done stuff that I thought was so brilliant. And then especially if I ever saw any of his originals where he's using photo collages and paint and all that different, just boggles the mind. I mean, to even have not only the imagination to do it, but the skill set to do it, totally mind boggling. And then I've seen him do stuff that if I never see it again, it won't bother me one bit,
No.
And it's not that it's not good work. It just doesn't appeal to me. Mm-hmm. But the stuff that he's done that's great, I can't even get it out of my head I couldn't get it out of my head if I tried. It stays with you. Stuff that's good stays with you. And so I think,
Yeah, it's the stuff that, for me, it's the stuff that I can't look at and go, I can see all the steps that they took to get there. Like, you can look at work and forensically break it down pretty quick and go, okay, I can see how they got this. And it doesn't mean I don't like it, but it's the stuff that I go, I have no idea how they got to this point.
Sure.
And I go, that's just going to live in my mind forever, because I just go, how?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. There's just something about it. I mean, I can do it from page to page in certain comics, even where I can look at certain pages and just go, like, well, this is just another comic.
Sure.
And then you get to a certain page and you go, dang, that's really good work there. I mean, that's just
bad
really
coffee one morning, great coffee the next morning.
Exactly. Yeah. No. And the stuff that's good stays with you, because it's like you were saying earlier about where it sets a bar. Something about those pinnacles of craft, whether it's a styles or techniques that you normally lean toward or anything like that, that's irregardless of any of it. When it appeals to you because the quality of it is good, it's just a great thing. It stays with you. It really does stay with you. Yeah. And even to the degree that sometimes you just got to go back and look at that again to see if it's as great as you remember it being, That's a real great piece of work, whether it's a comic or a painting or an illustration or a piece of music or anything else. And, and then there's the other stuff that you could maybe even enjoy for a while and forget about. But
yeah, and that's fine. You know what I mean? That's fine. That's 98% of everything in the world. It's okay.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
It's okay. And, and I'm going to lump a lot of what I've done in my life in that 98%. That's okay. I gave it 100% when I was doing it, but it's what it was. But so, okay, you said something about striking a chord, and we're on this kind of point. And I think about think about the artists who blow my mind. Like you can get into it like, oh man, I just love Toth. Like, look how simplified he figured everything out. Not that it's simple, it's very complex, but it's delineated at every point. And you go, oh, okay, that's what I'm going to put in my head. And then I'm going to sit down, I'm going to draw something. And what comes out is always the same annoying stuff that always comes out of me. Like I could always seem to be whatever that way my fingers strike a chord on the guitar, that's how I make the sound. Like if I needed to sound like another guitar player, the effort and energy that takes is almost more than it's worth to do. So, and the evolutionary process of creativity is incorporating things. How do you bring new stuff in? And do you find it a struggle for you to like say, hey, I'm really, really jazzed on X and I want to bring that into what I'm doing? How do you try to adjust your tiller as you work?
That's a great question. I think it's something that I've mentioned to a lot of people. I think is essential if you're going to bring something in that's new that you're happy about. You got to do it in a sketchbook. That's where for me it's always been the process. If you are experimenting, like for example, just with a new technique, if you're experimenting with a new technique or a new medium, and you love it, and you get to a place in a sketchbook or something where you've mastered it. Then incorporating it into the work that you're doing, for me at least personally, it's very natural because now this thing has solved a problem. That's why I'm excited about it. It's solved a problem that I didn't have a solution for before now. So the ability to incorporate it into the regular work becomes very natural. It becomes easy. In fact, it almost becomes inescapable because if you discover something that solves the problem for you, part of like what you were saying, when I first started working, I was studying a handful of artists only, and with a real heavy pinpoint on Mike Mignola as a major influence at that time. And the reason was because it wasn't just because he was good and great. He was solving a problem that I had, at least prior to that, been trying to figure out and couldn't figure out how to do it. And I was always more of a Frazetta, Dave Stevens, Jeff Jones, that real brushy, lush, Bernie Wrightson, those guys. Really organic, very, but I fell in love somewhere along the way with the graphic, dramatic, high contrast juxtaposition of black and white, negative space. And I couldn't figure out how to bridge the gap between that organic feeling stuff and the graphic. And when Mike did, he was always great. And when he did Dracula, obviously I loved it. But that wasn't even to the extent when he started to have the full influence on my work at the time. It was still very graphic. Someone else was inking him and stuff. And then I saw him at a show, and Seed of Destruction had been out, but I saw him at a show and he was showing us his Xeroxes of his pages for Seed of Destruction, which hadn't come out yet. And when I saw the Xerox, it just clicked in my mind. I understood how he was making the decisions that he was making. And his work solved this problem that I was trying to solve. And pretty soon, the unfortunate side of it is pretty soon I was using his solutions for all of my problems. And I realized I got to get away from that because I'm not going to ever discover anything new. And honestly, it was even a departure from, I think, my natural innate sensibilities to press so hard into that. But I had to do it to learn how to do some of the things. Invaluable, completely invaluable to learn how to do that stuff, and still use a lot of those things today, because once that problem is solved, it's solved.
It was so cool to see that happen with his art and how that evolution between 88 through 94, when you would see him do a project and, Craig Russell inks them or somebody else inks them, you see all these people kind of putting their shape over his work.
Sure.
And And I think he walked away from every single one with kind of like this sort of split thing happening internally. Like, oh, that looks so cool what they did. And it's not exactly what I want. And that battle was waging within Mike. And then the summer, I think it was like the summer of 93, he did, and I've said this plenty of times before, that he did, it seemed like he did almost every other cover at DC for like one summer. Mm-hmm. It was nutty. Like they had a whole Elseworlds bonanza that year, and he did every Elseworlds cover. And it was, you can see what became of Hellboy, like everything that was happening in Hellboy was going on with those covers. And so when he finally launched that 8-pager in Dark Horse Presents, it was like, oh yeah, this is it.
Yeah. Well, like he said, his first Hellboy story really was that Batman Sanctum thing that he did. And he did that, and he did some stuff with Ted McKeever, some short story work with Ted McKeever about Eddie Current. And I remember seeing that stuff, and that, because he had started inking himself, I had seen him ink himself on covers, but there was still that sort of inhibition and that sort of restrictive editorial control of, you can't let blacks be all broken up like that. It looks too sketchy, right? Superheroes don't look that way. We can't have that. Some of that is still there, even if the editor wasn't saying it, it's been sort of ingrained into you as a freelancer. But when I saw that Eddie Current stuff and the Sanctum, I mean, still I see that's one of those things. Some of the images in that book are they're just kind of burned into my brain. I mean, I can't. He solved a lot of problems in those stories and continues to solve them. And of course, he's a great artist. He's still evolving. I mean, his paintings now don't look like the work he was doing then. But equally great, So, yeah, I think for me as an artist, incorporating something new, it comes from, recognizing what someone else is doing and its appeal to you, and then sort of experimenting around with it or something. And if you fall in love with it, then it's great because it solves problems. And then there's the other side of things where you're just working so much, there's no time to do any of that at all. I work so much that I don't draw at all.
Well, that's the R&D, yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's essential to growth. And even at that time, I mean, I literally had to get rid of my collection of Mignola books so that I wouldn't refer to them to solve a problem. I never used them as a source of, I need to draw this figure, so I'm going to draw this, copy this figure. It was never that. It was a matter of, I'd look at his work and understand, to create a great depth of space without having to draw everything in a room. How do I do that? Oh, he did it like this, and it solves the problem for me. And those are those sort of linguistic shortcuts and graphic shortcuts that you were talking about, even with Adam on JLA. But somewhere I had to set that stuff aside and it came from Dan Slott, actually, when I was working on Arkham Asylum. He asked me to draw the third issue in like a cartoon style, which was a very different style than what the rest of the series was. And I couldn't do it. And it took me probably a week just to figure out how to even approach the idea of drawing like that. And then once I did, I realized I can draw stuff. I mean, I can draw things, and I've been relying so much on that linguistic shortcut that I haven't been drawing things on the page. And then I literally went back and redrew the entire first two issues, almost entirely. They had been sent back to me to ink with lettering done on the boards. I erased entire pages. I cut some of them up and chopped out the balloons and pasted them onto new pages for the entire. I didn't have a deadline.
Yeah.
And I knew that what I had produced up to that point just wasn't satisfied. Just didn't cut it anymore, and it had to be done. So so I think first of all, sketchbooks, as far as growing, I think are essential. because that's where you discover things you didn't know you could do. And you play with things that you recognize others do and see if it works for you, if it solves the problem. And then when those techniques become something where you've discovered how to use that to solve a problem, it just incorporates into the work inescapably, because I can't do this less. I'd have to dumb it down to do, you know what I mean? I'd have to dumb myself down to do this the way that I have been doing it before.
Right.
And it would take away from the artwork. That's what happened on that Arkham job. It's like once I had drawn the third issue, the first two issues just didn't, all I saw was shortcuts.
Right.
I didn't see drawing, and I wanted to see more drawing and less shortcuts.
That's really, really interesting. And I guess so you attribute that to the visual challenge that Dan laid down, and you had to sort of like, how do I make this happen? And in that process, something magical happened.
Yeah, it was a big turning point for me, because for him to ask me to draw something in a cartoony fairy tale style, which is what he was asking, it was something I actually avoided. I avoided that at all costs. I was, my intentions as an artist at that time were, that's silly, or that's, and I remember, it's like I said, I had a working relationship with Mike in those early years, because he gave me work, and I learned a lot from him. And I don't speak to him much these days, and haven't talked to him for a few years now. But when we talked a lot in those early days, I learned a lot. And when Dan Slott asked me to draw in that cartoonier style for the sake of the story, I had been avoiding it. And I remember Mike saying, he's like, well, at least you get to start out drawing cool stuff like monsters and stuff. He said, when I started, I had to draw funny animals,
Right.
He's talking about Rocket Raccoon. And,
yep.
How he hated it. Right. But now you look at him, he's drawing chicken-headed tuxedo characters and stuff, chickens with tuxedos on.
Sure.
And he's kind of gone back to these funny animals, and something that doesn't appeal at one point in your life, somehow at different times in life has a totally different appeal, because he solved these artistic problems.
Yep.
And once he solved those artistic problems, now he can do whatever he wants, whatever he feels like doing, and make it work within the parameters of what he enjoys. And I kind of, that really helped me. It really, really helped me to do that job and learn that there's an ability to draw that I still had, that I hadn't really even been utilizing. I hadn't been thinking that way.
Yeah. It's so funny because Dan was my first writer when I got into comics. So 91, I don't know if I don't think I was his first project, but he wasn't writing full time. He was at the art returns as editor. So his job was to put the artwork into envelopes and mail it back to people. So we get this gig for Power Pack, and we're having lunch or something, and he goes, hey, can you draw like Bill Watterson? Can you do Calvin and Hobbes? And I'm just like, well, that's the hardest thing to ask someone to do. Like that guy's the best there ever was. So we had a whole, I think there was like a whole page or so that had to be done in Spaceman Spiff, a terrible version of that, but it's classic Dan. Dan he's multimedia, just dragging everything into his comics.
Yeah, he really woke me up. I think he's the only writer that I've ever, shame on me, Dan. Sorry, Dan, but he's the only writer in all my years that I had to ask the editor. I got the first script for Arkham, and I spent probably a week trying to just do thumbnails, lay out pages and stuff, and I couldn't make it work. I could not make it work. I couldn't figure out how to get everything he was asking for on the page. And I called the editor, not with the intention of asking anybody to do rewrites, but literally just, I was so stressed out. I'm just like, dude, I can't draw this. I mean, like, I'm freaking out. I don't know how to draw this. And I called him and told him, and he's like, oh, okay, no worries. And he's like, I'll talk to Dan. So he asked Dan to rewrite the whole issue, which I had no idea he was going to do that, but he did. And it's the only time, I think, in my whole career that I've ever had a writer have to do a rewrite because of me specifically saying that I couldn't do what was there. And but what happened was, when I got the revised script back from Dan, my complaint at the time was that he was used to writing he was telling me he was used to writing these like Scooby-Doo and Looney Tunes comics and stuff, and in that vein, you're asking in certain panels for multiple things to happen, you know, like Wile E. Coyote presses the thing and the thing blows up and the Roadrunner's going by. And when you're doing Batman comics, to have that many things happening in a single panel and have dialogue and all that stuff too, it just wasn't my skill set. I didn't have the ability to do that. And I said, there's like 3 pages worth of material on each page. That's what I told the editor. And when Dan sent the script back, it was 1,000 times better. And every issue following it was better than the one before it. And so I think both of us really got a lot out of doing that project. I think, you know, whether we knew we were going to do that to each other or not, but I really learned a lot from that job.
Yeah. Anyways. Well, he's a prodigious writer. I mean, I think it's his nature. He's throwing everything into that, you know, page when he sits down.
Yeah, I think he's a sponge for one thing. He really seems to absorb material, anything that he's reading or has read or has seen, and he absorbs a lot. And he's also got a big a love for the material that he's working with and the medium and everything like that. And he really comes across.
I agree. So Black Canary, 6 issues. You're in
6 oversized issues.
Oh, sorry, I don't want to belittle your effort here, sir. So these are 22 pages. Congratulations.
Right. No.
So when does the first issue hit the stands? You know?
Yeah, it comes out November 27th.
Sweet.
I think is
Thanksgiving.
I think is the date. Yeah, and they're 28 pages each one, and it's just when I read the script, I had been wanting to work with Tom since I read, as I recall, the first script that he wrote for comics was The Vision. I did a cover for it, and the editor at Marvel, who was a guy who I had worked with a lot of times before, and I think is a great editor, Will Moss. He told me, he said, I think this guy's going to be a great, like a big time writer. He's really good. And so he sent me the script to get some ideas for the cover. And when I read the script, I was like, holy crap, it really is good. And then with Gabriel Walta drawing it was astonishingly. So I had been wanting to work with him since I read that. And then he did the great stuff that he's done since, Sheriff of Babylon and the Mr. Miracle stuff that he did with Mitch and all those different things, all the different projects he's been working on. I've got covers on a lot of his stuff. Yeah. And then this opportunity came up, and I was talking to the editor. I was only doing covers for things, and I said, "Oh man," he said, "Oh, it's something along the lines of, it's too bad you're doing that other thing because I got this Tom King thing I would have put you on." I was like, "What is it?" And he goes, "Oh, it's a Black Canary thing." And I'm like, "Sign me up." And he's like, "No, you mean for covers?" And I'm like, "No, sign me up, man. I want to work with him." And so he sent me the script, anyways, it's just so good. And it's one of those things where it's got a lot of heart. It's got a great character. Black Canary is one of my favorite characters. She's just a great design, constant, classic, been around forever. The wonderful dichotomy of the beauty and the
the
brawling
brawn.
fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a classic character, and I love the way Tom wrote this book. It's not just a fight. It is a brutal, bloody, fearsome book. But it's not just that violent fight. It's this great character story development of a character who deserved it. And so I'm stoked I get to draw it. It's not like anything I've drawn before. There's none of that. What we were talking about, those shortcuts. It's more of a. I wanted to just draw what he wrote, you know, and not try and find ways to utilize negative space or shadows as an excuse, but instead every sort of shape and every drawing is just with the intent of capturing the moment, the panel that he wrote there. And man, it's been a challenge, but it's such. I got the lettered copy of one of the issues the other day, and I just told the whole team, I said, God, I'm really grateful to be doing this book. It's really, I really like it.
Oh, it's so cool.
I really, really like it. I haven't been able to say that about every book I've worked on, but I really like this book. It's just, yeah. In fact, if I hadn't drawn it, I'd say I probably love it, you know, but as far as just being a good comic, it's a good comic.
That's so cool.
And to my way of thinking, it harkens to the original traditional ways of making it, telling a comic book story. For good or ill, I don't know. I just think that it has a language to it that I hope people really like when they look at it.
That's so cool. I mean, I can't wait for it. Is this going to be Black Label or regular World?
I don't know.
Oh,
it's not going to be part of the. It had potential to be part of the regular universe, but it wasn't written that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was more like what you were talking about earlier, where things shift and change, and publishers doing certain things, and they have to do those kind of things. You know, they have to have their line-wide motivations and agendas and all that kind of stuff, but Tom was just he was really adamant, and he was really supportive, and he just said, let this thing be what it is, you know. Let Ryan finish drawing it, let it be what it is. And that was my hope from the beginning too, because he wrote a great comic, and yeah, it's cool, man. It's pretty cool to get to draw this book, I gotta say.
I mean, I'm happy for you, man. It's people aren't going to get to see the smile on your face when you're saying that, but it comes through in your voice. It's pretty cool. Awesome. Are you coming out to New York for New York Comic Con, or are you still slaving? No. Okay.
No. Yeah. I'm still working on the book. I want to finish it before I do any more shows or anything like that. And once it's done, which will be in the next, I think the final issue I'll bring in early part of December, right after the first issue drops. So it'll just be fun to have it out there alive, and you know, letting people read it. It's really it wasn't what I expected when I got the script, and as soon as I read it, I was like, yeah, I can draw this. You know?
That's awesome.
So
yeah, it's awesome. It's really cool when you get a script, because when you know, unless you've been talking to the writer in advance, you don't know what you're getting. And to be able to sit down and read through something and go, wow, like when you can go get all jazzed up, it just, all you want to do is just start thumbnailing and drawing. Yeah,
absolutely. And in fact, you know, I've only ever, I think, had a real like verbal interaction with Tom once since the very beginning of all of this, because we did an interview recently, and that was like our first time talking. And he but like I said, he had written the story before I ever even signed on to draw it. And that's just I don't know what the normal situation is for him. It's definitely an unusual situation for me to get that. But yeah, it's just a cool comic. It's just a really cool comic. And when I read it the other day, all of the things that I was sort of waiting to, wrestle with my own shortcomings and stuff like that. The story and the lettering and the coloring by Dave is all so good that I didn't see as much of that as I normally do. So, I mean, really, like that's always the thing when you get a comic back that you worked on. And there's this sort of wrestling, this sort of back and forth where it's like you're happy that it exists, but you all, as an artist, you're like, oh, I wish. And this, I got it back and I read it and I was like, dang, that's a good comic.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's not every job that you feel like that on. Your intent is that, and you work for that effort every time. But this one, I feel really happy to be able to put it out there and have people check it out.
That's fantastic. I love it. I guess we'll just call it a day here now.
Cool, man. Sounds good.
Anything you want to say before we say farewell?
No, it's nice talking shop for a while, and it's been too long, and we should do it again. And I hope people like the work that comes out soon. And thanks for letting me talk about it for a bit.